Mike Tyson, 10 years old. Boom! Oh yeah, what happens next? Kabam! Our gang, 10 years old, thought nothing of those dead deer hanging from the rafters in that annual black bag filled with sawed-off deer heads. I used to think, how am I ever going to get Christmas gifts if Rudolph's team is right there in that bag? We used to be dressed in black, hopping through fences, playing jailbreak. We had to drug the neighbor's dog so he wouldn't yap his mouth so we could take the hinges off to get in the house, just to check it out. We snuck into a church just to check it out, of course. I'm originally from Auburn, New York, one of the toughest maximum secure prisons. So imagine, 1 block from your house, and there I am, Christy, my neighbor, all laying there like pigs in a blanket in a Pyrex bag, having a sleepover, and all of a sudden, these 2 guys, jumping. Who's these guys? I don't know. Most kids would have been scared. Our next logical thought, let's go check it out. No one's jumping our fences, right? It affected me so much that I thought, what are these youth doing that would eventually wind them up behind this concrete wall that I was so familiar with growing up? Typically, youth on their way to the candy store or to get pizza would just simply wave to a neighbor. Us, on the other hand, we'd be like, hey, guys in the watchtower, normal us, that's what we do. I knew that when I was speaking with the youth in the detention facility, and they were telling me, for example, when I was writing my court-ordered evaluation, and they'd be like, well, I'm in for, breaking and entering, and I would be thinking, oh my goodness, that was like all of us all the time. We should have all been here, but we just didn't get caught. It affected me so much that I thought, I'm going to write my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation on at-risk youth. I wanted to know what these youth were actually thinking about that would get them into trouble, that would eventually lead them down the road in front of these concrete walls that I was so familiar with growing up. My father used to say that the College of Education has the highest tuition, meaning that your life lessons are so important and how they impact your life. After graduating with a doctorate degree in counseling psychology, I actually wound up in a secure facility as a child psychologist. So I'm thinking, I just thought I was going to break into a prison as a youth, because we thought about that as well, because we were just so confident, because we got away with breaking in it everywhere else. And then, so I thought I'll break into a facility, and then I'll write about detained youth, and then you wind up actually working in a secure facility, so I guess you really do have to watch out what you wish for. As I walked into that facility, I thought, you know what? Maybe this is a place where there actually is going to be justification and reform and positive impacts on youth. But I knew on that second day, I put my Clouseau hat on, started taking notes every single day. I thought maybe this would be my chance to hopefully gather a bunch of education and make a difference. Someone who has made a difference in Nevada, who I've had the distinct honor and privilege of meeting, is Susan Roski. And some of the changes that she has made in Nevada are, for example, and they're big, children are no longer held for life without parole in the state of Nevada. Fewer youth are directly processed as adults. And third, it is prohibited for indiscriminate shackling of juveniles to court, so which means they can't look like they're on a set of Django and chains as they go into the courtroom. But there was one thing that Susan told me that I absolutely couldn't believe, and I thought the only way to share it with you was this video.
Having been a public defender for over 30 years, my biggest disappointment is the continued prosecution of children involved in the sex slave trade. I've represented children from all over the United States, some as young as 11 or 12 years of age, and they are arrested and prosecuted just like as if they had been arrested for a violent or a serious crime. They're arrested and handcuffed, they're booked, fingerprinted, photographed, and searched, and then placed in a cell, a small cement room with a cement bed and a toilet sink combination. These children are prosecuted through our juvenile justice system, and we know that detaining kids is harmful, yet we're still prosecuting these children, and many of these children are detained as long, if not longer, than children charged with serious or violent crimes.
I thought I was about to make a change until I walked into my office on the second week of work, thinking I was going to get my keys to my office, until I heard the phrase, "You are being terminated, effective immediately." Okay, that's good. But what would happen is, at that time, a film of mine was coming out, which was an expose of the very same system. So all of a sudden, I was like, okay, I'm kind of like Michael Moore at this point, trying to get a job at the NRA. Yeah, it was just as funny as that as I was on my way to the car. But what I did learn while I was in this facility, I saw the nurses actually showing me, okay, Susan, this is how we highlight, cut, and paste. Then we over-medicate and violate because we've got to fill the beds, because if the beds are filled, guess what? We're not getting any money. So I walked out of there knowing that what I was doing, at least I was on track. But I was like, wait a minute, all of a sudden, I felt like I was on the scene of the Flintstones. Because why? The Flintstones is what? Barbaric, antiquated. And I thought, wait a minute, is Fred Flintstone running our juvenile justice system in this country? Possibly. 2016 was the year for Stop the Solitary for Kids campaign, which meant that we should no longer in the state be holding youth who have mental health disorders and are heavily medicated in a cell as a positive approach for reform. Shocking to the contrary, an ACLU study report shows up that some facilities actually hold the youth in one of these cells for up to 3 months. And just a few examples of some of the ramifications of being held in a cell for so long is psychological brain damage, increased suicide rates. So one would wonder, well, what would actually permit someone to be in a solitary confinement? But in this study, actually, it was about youth who had too many books in a room, or they were digging for cookies. So what happens to the youth, for example, of a boy who ties his sister up and blows his father away with a shotgun? Or the girl that gets her eyes dug out on the Niagara Falls overpass, so she wouldn't be an eyewitness? Or the boy who dismembers his mother and ships her torso down a river? I do realize that some of those crimes obviously need rehabilitation and serious consequences, but we just went from killing to cookies with the same consequence. If we could all think of what it means to be an advocate or a mentor, think of the people in your life who've said certain things to you that have actually changed your life, whether you were 5 or 10 or 15 or 20, and the impact that it's had on your life. The reoccurring theme of these youth is their positivity. It's just amazing. I mean, they are in such despair moments, and they're like, Miss, I'm going to be the best dancer, or they're going to be a big rapper, or they want to be a judge or a lawyer, or they want to be an advocate, someone who will actually help them and save them from being behind the razor wires that face them. Jillian, we're walking out of the courtroom. She's crying, getting transferred to another facility, and as she's crying, she says to me, you know what, miss, I've got to be a judge so I can change the lives of all the people so they don't have to go through what I'm going through. And I said, you know what? You will. Judge Elijah Williams, 17th Circuit Court Judge of Florida, put it nicely. He says it's much easier to punish a person than it is to turn a child around. We all know, no matter what class we come from, we all deserve a pass. And this country feels as though it deserves a $21 billion pass. Every time you get your paycheck, look at the tax bracket and think that that $21 billion deficit, some of that comes out of that in your check. Because you never really think, like, how would this affect me, how it would be important to me. Senator Cory Booker put it nicely and described the system as being kind of like a cycle. He says it's eating away at our taxpayer dollars and consuming our national treasury. But obviously this is the best we can do, right? Because if we could be doing any better, why would it be such a high deficit? So incarceration minus prevention equals the USA way. Again, back to the Flintstones. Pharmaceutical companies spend millions of dollars. We were just talking about solitary confinement, but then there's like this chemical solitary confinement where the pharmaceutical companies spend millions on prescribing these youth medications. So say we have like Josh, he goes in one facility, he gets prescribed a bunch of medications, he gets diagnosed with God only knows how many diagnoses, and then he gets in trouble, he acts out, he goes to another facility, then he sees another doctor, another list of psychiatric drugs, and then before you know it, we've just developed a drug addict without even realizing it or knowing it. 1 out of every 3 youth that are in a facility actually are diagnosed with depression just based on the onset. And I can tell you right now, when you're behind those brick walls and the razor wire, it is kind of daunting, even for someone who's there on a daily basis. You're like, thank God that green pass worked to get me out of here. I do understand that some of these youth do need to be on psychotropic medications because I do understand the mental health field. But let's just say your best friend just got killed in a gang. You don't even know who your father is. You have a criminogenic family. Or you find out that your foster parents are just housing you to make an extra buck. Of course, within the chemically restrained confined walls is an education system. So what they call it is social promotion. Sounds great. Sounds pretty exclusive, exciting. So basically, as I just spoke to you about how Josh, who is going through all of these facilities, secure, non-secure, or a foster home, is kind of the same way. So you get into trouble. Now you're out of your school. Now you're tested into 6th grade. Then you get in trouble and you go into another facility. And obviously, as you go through these facilities, your self-esteem goes down the drain. Your ambition is lost to, be a great student. So before you know it, they seriously don't even know what grade they're in. So when I'm sitting there and part of the evaluation is like, okay, so what grade you're in? Miss, I don't know what grade I'm in. Yes, they don't know what grade they're in. There's such a high percentage of youth in this country that seriously, honestly, just don't know what grade they're in because how could they? They've been told they're in so many grades. But youth appearing in court quadruples their chances of dropping out of school entirely. Because obviously it affects their self-esteem, their self-worth, and their drive to succeed. The Annie E. Casey Foundation recently had just done a study on the effects of youth who are incarcerated. Dangerous, ineffective, inadequate, unnecessary, and wasteful. So for that, today we're going to put on our calendars October 29th, Strive and Dive Day. We're going to strive to make a difference and dive in and do it. How would we do that? We would do it by going to a secure facility that you don't have to try and break into like we did, a non-secure facility or a foster home, and just try to be an advocate, try to be a mentor. It is football season. Can you imagine if every football player actually went into one of these facilities and took just 15 or 20 minutes just to let them know their story? Because they are inspiring, because they've all come from such diverse backgrounds. Or a judge or a lawyer or an advocate or a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer, anyone, you. Why not, right? I started out with Mike Tyson, and I'm going to close with Mike Tyson. When he was 10 years old and he did get thrown into that secure detention facility, guess who walked through those doors? Muhammad Ali. And you can find Mike Tyson on several interviews saying that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be who I am today. And he was 10. And 10 years later, look what we had. Mike Tyson. We live in one of the greatest countries in the world, but unfortunately, it is one of the biggest disasters on the planet, called the juvenile justice system. And it's about time we make that change. Thank you.